Welcome back to Neon Galactic, a production of PBS affiliate Key TV in Eureka, California. I'm your host, James Falk. Thanks for joining us. In an age where we've largely lost touch with the deep and fundamental energies of consciousness and community, there has recently been an evolution in the way some approach and understand the human psyche. Through advances in technology, we've obtained deeper and finer pictures of the chemical and biological bases for what makes up the human mind, the material elements. But the value of subjective experience and lifting up and defining an individual personality too often gets lost or neglected in the race to understand the mechanisms of disease over the experience of health and the healing process. Yet a movement now unfolding among some in the mental health and medical communities seeks to explore visionary experiences as a means of processing trauma and addressing the pervasive sense of alienation that now haunts our species. Psychedelic therapies, such as the kind offered by Roots to Thrive through its ketamine-assisted program, lift people out of everyday consciousness and allow for a kind of unifying transcendence. It's a new approach through an ancient technology, transforming the way we think of ourselves, our minds, and potentially even our place in the universe. It works. Its efficacy as a means to spur emotional and spiritual growth has been demonstrated over and over again in clinics and facilities all over the world. The drugs are one thing, but the sense of hope, community, sanctity, connection, and joy, these seem to be the real and abiding strengths of the program as I understand it. We've got an exciting show planned for today. My friend Chris Avis joins us to welcome Graham Walker and Dr. Pamela Kryskow from Roots to Thrive. We'll explore their team's mission, their methodology, and the importance of rethinking how we encounter and treat human suffering. Thanks for joining us, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
So everyone's going to get a chance to talk. We're going to have a lively discussion, but let's start with Graham. Can you sort of give us an introduction to yourself and then explain how you came to be affiliated with Roots to Thrive and what Roots to Thrive is for people who may not be acquainted?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, James. So I'm a registered clinical counselor, and I've been a facilitator with Roots to Thrive since 2021. And I first became affiliated with Roots to Thrive as a participant. I was looking for something different in terms of healing and personal growth. And I had already had an interest in psychedelic experiences from before that and had become aware that Roots to Thrive was working with ketamine and in a very unique way using community. So I started as a participant and then from there worked my way into becoming a facilitator. The program itself is, in my opinion, a very powerful and unique model. It incorporates both online and in-person modalities, and it's a 12-week model. And so there's 12 weekly online, what we call community of practice sessions. And so number of people get together, and there's a large group session, and then there's some teaching of some core principles around healing and growth and self-regulation. And then from there, we break off into small groups, and we have a facilitated process where people will share about their own experiences, and then we go through a round of compassionate witnessing after each share. And so what this involves is essentially all the participants wrapping around the person who just shared and showing them compassion. And this is one of the key ingredients that people really respond to and really seems to help them in their healing process. Now, within the 12 weeks, there are also 3 in-person ketamine-assisted therapy sessions. So all the participants meet, and they're the same group that's in that small group meets, and there is a process where it involves ceremony and the use of the ketamine to have a psychedelic experience. Very team-oriented approach. There's a large team involved in this process on the Roots side. And then we wrap that up, 3 of those within the 12 weeks, kind of in the middle, and then there will be a number of online 12-week sessions after that. There's also integration as part of this, where people are able to speak about their experiences and, again, witness each other, share, support each other. And yeah, I would say that's the basics of the program. And yeah, I'm as a team member, as a participant, and a team member, I've found it to be an incredibly healing and growth promoting experience, even continuing on as a facilitator.
We'll get into all of that, hopefully. Pamela, can you give us a little bit of an introduction into who you are? You have a long list of bona fides, and talk about how you got to this work and how you got involved with Roots to Thrive.
This wasn't the first thing I ever did in my life. I have a long life ahead of before me. I was a forestry firefighter in a previous life, and then I was a city firefighter for 8 years, and then I went on into medicine. So I'm a medical doctor. My expertise is in chronic pain and psychedelic-assisted therapies. Other hats I get the privilege of wearing is I'm a board member of the Psychedelic Association of Canada. And additionally, I'm the medical chair of Vancouver Island University's postgraduate certificate in psychedelic-assisted therapy, which is Canada's only full year long with practicum and supervision psychedelic-assisted therapy training the practitioners of the now and the future. Yeah, so Roots to Thrive, I'm the medical lead there. I came to Roots to Thrive. I had the great fortune in the universe of meeting Dr. Shannon Dames and her partner Phil Dames. Not long after they had created Roots to Thrive, the resiliency program. So it was Roots to Thrive, a program that was piloted with nurses to help increase resiliency in nurses that have significant job stress, significant opportunities to get PTSD, moral injury, burnout. And our worlds happily collided, and we put our heads together and thought how we could accelerate the healing by adding psychedelic assisted therapy into the program. So we recreated the program with a wonderful team, including a psychiatrist, Crosby Watler, his partner, Helen Watler, who's a somatic therapist, a very seasoned spiritual care person and nurse, Gail Pikikut, and a spiritual care woman, and Marnie Roper. Who else am I missing? Wes Taylor as a therapist. And I really hope I'm not missing anyone. But we came together and we figured out how we could do psychedelic assisted therapy in this Roots to Thrive model. Because the model was great. We piloted it. We got some money from the Health Authority, and we piloted it with 2 cohorts, 2 8-person groups of nurses and therapists and doctors that came through it. And it went phenomenally. And the feedback was great. The healing was great. And we just knew we had to keep doing it. So we've been reiterating and looking at it as a learning system, constantly quality improving it every single time. And pretty thrilled to say we're about to start intaking our 12th group, our 12th 3-month group. So they're 3-month programs. And of course, we've also expanded the program to include psilocybin-assisted therapy and MDMA-assisted therapy. So
fantastic. Well, thank you for that. Now, Chris Avis is an educator, and he's been on the show before. He's a good friend of mine, and viewers of Neon Galactic, pay attention because he will be back. We have some more offerings coming up later in June. Well, he will also be co-hosting. But he is was a participant with Roots to Thrive, and we talked about it in a previous episode. But can you sort of describe for us, Chris, how you came to know about the program and what you would say, from a global perspective, what it did for you in your life?
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up very much with kind of a worldview steeped in materialism, not meaning like being materialistic per se, but very much kind of a physicalism based worldview. I didn't really have any kind of spiritual or religious upbringing to speak of, and never really looked into those avenues seriously at all. And despite having a background through my schooling, which is just in physics, which is what I teach, there's always been part of me that had kind of been intrigued in some more, let's say, out there elements, interested in things like the paranormal and aspects of spiritual things that were meaningful to folks that experienced them, but I'd never had that direct personal experience. What led me to Roots is that I have struggled with ongoing depression and anxiety throughout my life. Still grapple with it from day to day, but it's gotten a lot better since being part of the program. And I've come to see that part of the reason that I've grappled with that is that kind of worldview and that lack of that kind of spiritual element in my life. So I heard about it, I think, when it was first getting launched in those initial cohorts that Pam spoke of with the doctors and the nurses there, and I was really intrigued. And because I had been interested in hearing about plant medicine, but was frankly a little bit nervous about just going down to some street corner and purchasing mushrooms from someone. There was a degree of lack of safety there. So as Roots grew, the fact that they were taking in now members of the general public, and there was so much safety in this program for it being associated with and having all of these medical professionals from different fields, from the doctors, counselors, energy workers, psychiatrists, the whole gamut being involved. It felt like a very, very safe environment to do this thing that had been intriguing to me. So that's what drew me in. And, the safety of having this also, being something that had been vetted through peer review was what was initially appealing to me, that kind of sciencey side of things. But what has been the most shocking thing to me from Roots is that the most profound effect for me has been through this kind of change in my worldview. You and I have talked a little bit about Jeffrey Kripal's work on having a flip and these experiences for folks that often don't have any experience with, more woo phenomena or just more spiritual elements, and how that can suddenly invert your whole worldview. Really was the most profound effect for me. And the way I've kind of described it is as being like a stool where I had two legs, but was missing a third leg for stability, and being able to explore that gave me that kind of third leg, which makes me feel a lot more grounded and a lot more stable. So it's been really tremendously expansive in terms of how it's increased my worldview and made me ask questions about the very fundamental nature about why we're here and what reality is. But the other piece that I think is really key, and Pam and Graham have talked about the team nature of Roots, but also I would say the team nature of the cohorts. One of the major themes of Roots is that healing happens in community. Many of us come to this program with attachment trauma coming from various things that have happened to us in our lives where that community piece wasn't there for us, and so they really create this really safe container where you're in a small cohort of folks who are with you through these ketamine experiences and with you through these 12 weeks. But in my case, I've been very fortunate to have these cohorts continue on to communicate after and interact. And we kind of host unofficial communities of practice. And Roots also offers these alumni programs. So for me, one of the other major pieces was this greater increase in community in my life since having been in this program, and how enriching that piece has been, and how hungry I was without even realizing it for that those connections and that meaningful community where we're actually talking about what it is to be human and not necessarily who won the sports game or who's winning in the polls or whatnot. Those really deep discussions about what life's all about. So that's been in a nutshell for me.
Okay.
Can I jump in for a sec before you go on? Because I made a major mistake in forgetting one of the most important person on our team mentioning it. And that's Elder Geraldine Manson. She's this new nameless elder. And she has held the ceremonial aspect for us and really mentored us. And I feel terrible she was there right from the beginning, walking with us to develop Roots to Thrive. And she remains our elder on the team, along with a number of other knowledge keepers now and other elders. But I just wanted to get that out there right away, because she's just absolutely a wise gem.
That's important. One of the things that captivated me about this whole effort is that the way that you guys respect the indigenous wisdom and how you try to work that into your program, and you respect ritual as a human activity that sort of has more depth than we're traditionally allowed to access in modern society. And I think that that's so important, and it's hopefully reflective of a new evolution in society where we begin to return to some of those types of wisdom that we've missed in the past. One of the things I wanted to ask you guys about is that, I mean, you guys are a very structured program, and that's one of the reasons why I like it. And there's a lot of community and a lot of support. But we're starting to see these advertisements on social media and elsewhere saying ketamine therapy will send you 3 tabs, and you take them, and then you'll talk to a doctor over Zoom for 15 minutes, and you'll be great. Can you talk a little bit about, and this is open for anyone, I mean, what are the dangers in that, or are there any? And how does Roots contrast with that? You talked a little bit about it already, but how do all the things that you're talking about with the cohorts and the various support groups and whatnot, how do they help support the patients as they go through the process? Graham, we'll start with you, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. So now I've never been through a process where I've just done the ketamine and had it, gone home with it and spoken to a doctor over the phone. So I don't know exactly what that experience would be like. I can only imagine into it. And based on my experience working with folks in our Roots to Thrive program, the support is really important, like a real wraparound team support, and not only from the team, but also with the other participants. And so what you're describing with these other programs that just are essentially minimal support around the ketamine, that strikes me as something that's really lacking, and potentially destabilizing for some folks, I would imagine, if they have a really big experience and then don't have the supports and the community around them to hold them to work through, a really potentially disorienting and destabilizing experience. So I would have concern about that for some people. And Roots to Thrive is definitely different than that in terms of emphasizing community, emphasizing support. Not only do we have these weekly online meetings, but participants are able to reach out to the rest of the team, their facilitators, doctors, psychiatrists, energy workers, to get extra support if and when needed, which I think is really important. And I wouldn't feel right being part of a program that didn't have that kind of support in place.
Pamela?
Yeah, and so a number of things that are really important. So on purpose, Roots to Thrive became a nonprofit so that we could put patients number one.
Yeah, absolutely.
Our service to patients and clients are, we use the word participants. We prefer that because we believe they're responsible for their healing. We're just facilitating alongside. And that's really important. And I think it goes back to what you asked about like the at-home ketamine, et cetera, et cetera. We have a very different philosophy that I think aligns. If we had all stayed in our lineages, if we were really in these medicine lineages, the philosophy we have is we give these medicines, and it's important. What we do is important. People's healing is important. Our support and structure and ceremony is important. Well, we are in service to humanity. We are in service to our participants. So when we give a medicine, whether it's ketamine, psilocybin, or MDMA, we are responsible for that. And if we were living in our traditional places, like if I was still where my ancestors came from, there would be medicine people in the community that would be responsible for the medicine, the follow-up, the care. The community would be responsible for the care. And we take that at Roots to Thrive really seriously, that we are giving a medicine that can do all sorts of amazing things from someone. It can be hard, it can be easy, it can be a shakeup, it can be a spiritual emergency, it can be all sorts of stuff. And we take that responsibility, and like Graham said, we wrap around. and take responsibility for that medicine for as long as it takes. That's why we have the alumni and beyond. I still have patients and participants at email, and I'm fully available to them 3-4 years later. So that responsibility that is not there when you say, oh, you've got depression, here's some lozenges. Oh, you're not feeling good, dude, here's some mushrooms. Like, we feel that when you give them medicine, you're responsible for the medicine. So there's like a fundamental difference. And additionally, even though we weave both the Indigenous ways of knowing with Western ways of knowing, we try to take the best of both worlds. We're not like either or, black or white. We're like, there's good in all. What's the best of it, and how can we weave it together? So we're also not like the biological pharmaceutical plug and play. Like, you got a problem, here's a pill. We're not going for that. What we're going for, you have a health challenge, whether it's psychological, physiological, whatever, or physical. You have a health challenge, and here is a tool that may help you through it. And so we will help move you through that with the medicine, in community, as Graham said, in groups, in unconditional positive regard, in compassionate witnessing, so that you have the psychedelic medicine alongside of community, connection, and love, which are the real healers, and move people through that. We're aiming for cure. Like, we won't get that for everyone, but we're aiming for transformation. We don't want people to be lifelong customers. We want them to never need us again. We want them to be so well. And that is not a commercial process. That is a nonprofit in service to humanity process. And I've been a strong advocate that I don't think helping people get well should be a shareholder entity. It is so important right now. It should be service to humanity, and Roots to Thrive shows up as that. This is service to humanity. So we're not just giving you something, we're there with you. Yeah. And we take responsibility for it. And it's looking at it all different, and we're centering the participants, the patients, the clients as the most important part.
What's fascinating about that to me is I may have mentioned it to you before, but I'm a recovered opiate addict, and I had an injury, and I had knee surgery, and I got addicted to pain pills. And the idea that the caretaker is responsible with the medication that they're prescribing strikes a chord with me, because I think that there have been a lot of doctors, and I don't want to paint anyone with a broad brush or anything, but there has been a detachment with, you have a symptom, well, let me treat the symptom, here's a bottle of pills, you go away, and then they forget about you until you come back and need more pills or whatever else, and there's very little investment in your ongoing recovery or the arc of your journey. And I think that being invested in that as healthcare providers is hugely important, and I think hugely reassuring for people that would want to get involved. You take it more seriously than I think a lot of other folks do with traditional medicine, and I think that that's a glaring need. Chris, did you want to take a shot at that question?
Yeah. So riffing on one of the things that Pamela's kind of mentioned is these different layers to Roots, I think, is one of the things that adds to its safety, because I look at it as different hooks that you can glom onto to help integrate that. So you have the Indigenous lens, you have the spiritual lens, which is not first and foremost, but it's there. You have the psychological lens, you have the medical background lens there, and so you can pick any of those things that speak to you and reach out to that. And because the team is diverse and they are all available to all the participants, you can kind of work with people whose personalities, whose backgrounds make sense to you, as opposed to just that one person there. So that's super helpful, super important. And really also the integration piece is very important as well after your ketamine sits, where it's 2 or 3 days later, you get on a community Zoom call and you're able to just sit there and unpack this. Because one of the things that is striking about this medicine is it's long lasting. And so there's the initial shock of what you experience the day of. There's the kind of 48-hour period afterwards where you've got this enhanced neuroplasticity and you're kind of rethinking things. But the other thing that I've been really appreciative of is that this is a very long lasting thing in that it will sometimes be 6 months or 8 months later where I'm going, hey, I'm reacting differently to this situation, or suddenly I have this new perspective on things. And what do I do with this? And I've been fortunate to have that community to reach out to and go, does anyone else like considering their lives totally differently because of this? One of the things I jokingly would say is that like literally in my first sit, I felt as though I had died. And the last kind of rational thought I had as I went under was there needed to be a stronger warning label on this. And I can't imagine just doing this with a couple of tablets that came in the mail. I'm very glad I had, two facilitators in the room and Pam next door in case anything went wrong there. But really what it feels like, and growing up, I was a big Joseph Campbell fan, is that this is kind of like embarking on the hero's journey. And everyone's got their own particular quest or their own particular dragon that they need to defeat. But as part of the hero's journey, you die. You die spiritually and you are reborn. And that is not something to be taken lightly. And I think a lot of people want that. They want their lives to be completely radically different. But then there's the actual shock of going through, getting from my life being dissatisfying now to completely reorienting yourself there. And you want people along the way. So I very much feel like, Frodo leaves the Shire. Frodo's not alone. Frodo has the other hobbits with them. Some of them are members of the Roots team. Some of them are members of the community at practice. So we're healing in community, but we're also doing our own healing work on our own inner hero's journey. And they do their best to really make that as safe as they possibly can. And I'm so grateful for that.
Yeah. There seems to be, I mentioned those ads that are on social media and elsewhere where they're marketing this stuff. There seems to be a real hunger for these types of experiences. And people are desperate and sometimes going to places maybe where they shouldn't. But can you speak to a little bit about what you see in modern society that makes people thirsty for this kind of experience and what that says about who and what we are right now as human beings, that we lack traditionally these kinds of whether you want to call them rites of passage or rites of awakening, or, we seem to be lacking that. And is this a way of trying to get some of that back, Graham?
I actually agree completely with what you said. I think that it does. It comes down to our modern Western culture and society lacking rites of passage, lacking a process of initiation, where you look at more traditional societies where they have these rites, and what do they involve? They involve what Chris was speaking about, getting actually broken down and rebuilt to be a new person, to take on a new role within society. And it's an expanded role, and we're lacking that. So I think you look around and we're seeing an entire society of uninitiated people, and they're finding themselves in roles that they are actually not prepared to handle with the kind of maturity and insight that those roles demand. And I think that has a lot to do with what's a lot of the problems that we're seeing in the world today. We see all these, multi-billion-dollar CEOs that are acting like adolescents in a lot of respects. And so I think that what's happening is we're seeing the rumblings now where people maybe don't have the words to put to it. They don't maybe know that what they're looking for is initiation, but subconsciously that is exactly what they're looking for. Speaking for myself, I know that is precisely what I was looking for and why I was on this quest, that I needed more than what my teachers and the people that were available to me in my society were able to give me, because they were uninitiated. And so finding psychedelic experiences and processes like what Roots to Thrive are offering, I think can give that to people. And I think it's really important, really, really essential if our society is going to grow and mature in the way that I think we need it to.
Pamela?
Well, I totally agree with everything. And my soapbox is we're in an odd time. We have generations of folks coming up that don't know how to play. They're not playing outside. Like I got to go outside and play until dark with friends, run up and down the neighborhood. We weren't attached to screens. We got to play video games once in a while, but we lived outside. We played, we failed, we fought, we interacted, we figured it out, we made up games, we did all sorts of stuff. And what we have is a lot of folks coming up where instead of having that, the kids and young adults now, that their screens were their best friends, are their best friends now. And everything's on the screen, and they have to be on the screen because their friends are on the screen, but their friends aren't really friends. They're just, they got to like this, and they got to respond really quickly, and they've got to compare themselves to all these things. And then they're getting their dopamine from scrolling and negativity. And, you've got the algorithms, and, so you have, as Graham said too, and Chris too, like the connection, the community and the connection. We're craving connection, we're craving community, but we're looking at a screen. So we're at the grocery store where there's people in front of us and behind us in the line that we could be engaging with, and we're looking at a screen. We're at this coffee shop in line to get our coffee, and we could be engaging, and we're looking at a screen. So we're so lonely, surrounded by so many people, yet we're choosing, instead of to connect, to look at our screens. And so when you come into a program like Roots to Thrive, where suddenly you are engaging, you are leaning in, you are sharing, you are being heard, you are hearing other people. And a lot of times the Roots to Thrive team can totally take a back seat because the participants in their small group are doing it. And we have a lot of groups that still meet. Like, well, after they're still meeting. There's groups that get together for meals and eat. There was a group that went on vacation together. Actually, a couple, more than one group that went on vacation. So they made these connections. So a lot of the symptomology coming into our program like ours, and especially coming in, I think in the future, is going to be social disconnection, substance use related to that, eating disorders related to that, social anxiety related to that. And this is all curable if everyone just put down their phones and talked to people and engaged in their communities. Right. So, it's complex. But it's fixable. Like, it is absolutely a fixable thing. Like, in 1 year, we could fix this. And then programs like ours could truly, what we would be working with is mostly trauma, like the trauma that is fixable with these medicines. So I feel forever optimistic because you can put down the machine, you can put down the phone, and you can go outside and play.
Amen to that. Chris, did you have anything to add?
Yeah. I mean, in thinking about this, I'm reflecting on how, certainly in my parents' generation, post World War II, that society became increasingly secular. And I think I looked at that as a good thing, because we can always point to examples of how organized religion has all these evils associated with it. But for folks that were going to church or temple or wherever, there was two things that came out of that. One is the community, which we've spoken about, but also meaning. There is a model to make sense of the universe. And in North America, as we've elevated this kind of more materialism-based worldview, the meaning that I draw from that is almost nihilism in some sense. Well, you know what? You were born to a family and you had trauma. That just happened because of some random connections of amino acids that happened millions of years ago that led to this point, and there's no point to it all. And it's a bleak outlook, and it's a hopeless outlook. And it's not to say that you necessarily need to turn to a particular faith, but grappling with some form of meaning that you make personally, I think, is really helpful, and it's something I just never explored. So that is one part of it there. I think the other thing I would add on to what Graham and Pam have said that I've become more aware of with Roots to Thrive is that I was kind of operating almost exclusively out of honoring forms of intelligence that were basically cognitive only, not listening to my body, repressing my emotions, not honoring any kind of spiritual wisdom there. And I think there's a lot that can be gleaned, a lot of really valuable insight that you can almost get first from those different sources there. And that's some of the things that help you're helped to engage with. But to do that, one of the things that you need is space. And I'm really struck whenever I've done a ketamine sit that it's pretty much a whole day, and then there's 2 days afterwards where I'm in this kind of liminal space where it's this protected space, and thinking about just like how often do I get 3 days just to myself to focus on my own healing, Because the other
Yeah.
thing that happens from this go, go, go tech heavy society is there's never a time when you're just allowing the world to be away for a bit and just being in this healing kind of cocoon. And I think about how much healing could happen if the world also just slowed down and let us just take in everything that's happened to us, especially since COVID.
Yeah. One of the things I wanted to talk about was what kind of experiences people are happening. And then the fact that you've diversified the program, you now have psilocybin and also MDMA. I'm curious as to, are you targeting certain types of patients to different types of mechanisms or not? And what kinds of experiences are people having that are proving so therapeutic? I mean, beyond the community and everything else that you guys are providing clinically, I mean, what about those visionary moments under the influence of these psychedelics makes it so impactful? Anyone?
Well, I can jump into the medicines, and then Graham, we just had a weekend of wonderful sessions, so I'll hand that back to you, and you can share, and Chris too. So we in Canada, where we are, we were able to access psilocybin mushrooms, whole psilocybin mushrooms, through a Section 56 exemption through Health Canada. So we were able to have folks that had a qualifying diagnosis, which in this case was end-of-life anxiety, depression, that had not responded to other therapies and had a palliative diagnosis. So our very first group cohort with psilocybin was actually with mushrooms, which was historic to do something legal like that in Canada. Then Health Canada changed how they wanted us to approach that. And we had to go through a different program called Special Access, which then meant subsequent small groups ended up either having access. Some groups got access to synthetic psilocybin, and most recently, our patients have been getting access to botanically extracted psilocybin. So more of the constituents of the whole mushroom extracted. And those folks, in Canada, the two indications right now that Health Canada is proving is end-of-life anxiety and depression. Our depression and anxiety are existential distress related to a palliative care diagnosis, and treatment-resistant depression for psilocybin. For MDMA, we can get special access approval for MDMA for PTSD. So that's all we can do right now. And so we have been offering those programs when we can, and as we can get the exemptions. And I'm just going to say one thing about you asked about the transformations. What I love is I get to see people at different time stamps through the program. And so it's kind of like, if you don't get to see a good friend for a month and you see them a month later and their hair's grown, you're like, oh, your hair's grown. So I kind of get to see that. So I see them at the very beginning when they come into the program with the challenges, and then I get to see them at the sessions and I just love the change that you actually physically see in people. You see like a brightness come back into their being, like it's like their eyes brighten, the skin looks more alive. Their articulation is clearer. It's like they're lighter. It's like they have a vision of what their life means and where they're going. It's a whole bunch of factors that you can say, oh, I can see a bit of this and a bit of this, but the clarity of speech, the clarity of ideas that come over time. And then because we have the alumni program, the refreshers, then you see people further on after months, years even, they've been integrating, like Chris said, the insights keep coming, and they may have come into the program for, substance use, PTSD, and depression. And now we're seeing them a year and a half later to come back and do a refresh. And they're like, I just want to be a better parent. I just want to be better. Like all that other stuff is gone. And now they're working on taking themselves to higher levels of wellness. So that's kind of like the 50,000 foot view of what we see, but I'll hand it over to Graham, because we just had 40 some people go through sessions last weekend.
Yeah. And I love that broad view. And then zooming into the closer view, you get such a broad range of experiences. There is no no typical experience, I would say. People are having generally big experiences, but they're so diverse. And some people have experiences of, the love and the light and all that. Wonderful. Some people go into places where it's challenging. There's challenging emotions, there's darkness, there's fear, they're going into it. But my experience has always been that when we do zoom out and take our time with this, the medicine gives people what they need. And when they get these challenging experiences, having the time, the space to integrate, to have support, allows people to work with those experiences and find the value within it. And they're provided the support is in place, I always see that the people find that value, and they start to shine a little bit more, just like what Pam was saying. And so, yeah, we in the moment, we do integrate there in ceremony, and people will explain experiences, and yeah, they're big, they're psychedelic, they've gone to other realms within their minds, and it's often beautiful and it's often exciting, and then they settle down again, that big experience, they come back to earth, so to speak. But there's provided that support, that integration process, they're able to take pieces of that with them to inform and enrich their lives. And so they have these big experiences, they come back to earth, and they have a little something to work with to move them forward a little bit more. And it's a beautiful process that I'm just so grateful to be a part of, and humbled by, because there's just there's a lot of mystery involved in this process as well. And we speak about the inner healing intelligence as an idea that I found a lot of value in, and a lot of participants have as well, that there is this mysterious aspect to this healing process. Just like, when you cut your body and the body heals itself, there's something that happens on that emotional level as well. And when we are able to lean into and trust that inner healing intelligence, it guides us, and it takes us where we need to go. And again, often find myself very humbled to be a part of this process.
Yeah. Chris?
Yeah, I'll jump in on that. Pam and Graham have spoken beautifully to some of the diversity there. The two words that come up for me with the diversity of shares is one is ineffable, the difficulty that people have to even communicate with words as to what they've experienced, but also sacred. This is a very safe program. There are agreements that we put in place around confidentiality, and you will be in this room even if you have not had a powerful experience that day, because the nature can vary over your course of your program. You're going to see people letting go of trauma that has haunted them for decades in some cases, and to be able to bear witness to that and be part of that supportive net that's holding that person is incredibly touching. One of the things I think that hasn't been mentioned that is important with psychedelics is the idea of set and setting being so crucial to make the experience important. So part of what is done with this program is, in advance of it, there's a lot of discussion done about what it's going to be like the day of, but we're also coached to come up with an intention to really find some time to meditate and journal and think about what it is, what can you articulate what it is that you really need to have to heal you. And you'll go in there and you'll share these intentions with the group. And one of the interesting things, as Graham said, is that the medicine will often share you or give you what you need. And sometimes it's not, I will see people pose questions and it's not answered in the form necessarily of a narrative. And it's not even answered that day or even a month later. It comes when you are put in that same situation that's always traumatized you and you respond differently. And so having that expectation set to be able to, first of all, just deal with whatever you are shown, but also to deal with and prepare for the longer term pieces is really important. And yeah, just the sheer diversity of experiences that the same medicine invokes in people is honestly fascinating, like how it can have such different effects. Some people get literally much more sensation-based experiences For me, it felt like I had gone to this other realm and my senses no longer made sense. It's as if the stimuli that I was receiving was not mapping properly. I could explain it as altered brain chemistry, but that's not what it felt like. It felt like literally going to some other sort of realm of existence. And I will believe that is what actually happened, because that's how strongly the felt sense was. Other folks will experience narratives. They'll engage with people from their past, even their past selves, as if they were reparenting themselves. Some have these very vivid imageries, and it's one of the best parts of the experience, is just to hear what has come up for other people. And that's something you would not get without having that communal experience.
Yeah. So one of the words that's sort of a dirty word in modern society is spirit, right? Like if you're talking to a secular audience and you say the word spirit, immediately they're worried that you're going to start thumping your good book and inviting them to church on Sundays and giving them a dirty look if they say no. But in prelude to this interview, I was doing some research on some researchers who had been working on psychedelic stuff in the past. One guy was Stanislav Grof, and he did a lot with LSD treatment over the years. And he believed that he had begun to map sort of a transpersonal realm for folks that was deeper than the subconscious and shared by all of humanity, and that only through the use of psychedelics can we begin to tap into this. I mean, there are other modes, but that's I guess an easy way, although it's not easy to access that. Other ways might be meditation or other ways of changing our states of consciousness. Do you guys find enough consistency in what you see with people to validate that in your mind? Or, I mean, how do you see spirit playing into this? And I understand that this is your perspective and not necessarily for Roots to Thrive, but I'm interested in the realizations you guys may have had watching all these people go through this vast process of healing that has to be energizing to witness. Pamela, do you want to start with that?
Yeah, and again, I'd like to pull out to the wider view. Like, we are all complex beings, right? We're spiritual, we're physical, we're mental. Like, all this stuff is part of us, and it's interesting because it is a blip in history that we have moved kind of really to this medicalization and like separation. And I think the nice thing that we're doing at Roots to Thrive is we're allowing all of the team to come back to wholeness as well, that we can show up as our whole selves. Like myself, I can be Pam, the medical doctor, but I can also be Pam, the gardener, and Pam, the spiritual person, Pam, the person that can listen to whales all day. And, like there's,
Amen.
yeah. And I think there's this wholeness of us, and this separation is just artificial, and it's really a short blip in time. It's a very short blip in time, hundreds of years, really. And if we kind of slide that aside and go, like, we don't come into medicine thinking I have to segment myself, and yet we do. Nobody's again, this is the bigger view. I think it's important that, like, medical professionals, healthcare professionals, we don't go into these fields to feed the machine. We get in the machine and we went, wait a minute, this is not what I signed up for. And then we have an opportunity like Roots to Thrive to recalibrate it back to whole human health, right? And that spiritual side, whether it's on the more organized with religion, or separate, or not separate but different, whatever that continuum, or that those options are, whether it's just the awe and wonder of looking at a scene like this, sitting on a lakeside and staring at the beauty of a ball going through space that has enough water and vegetation and warmth for us to actually exist. Like we can have all that, and so often we will hear with the participants is like, I've never been religious, I've never seen myself as spiritual, but I'm changing. There's something different. I feel this connection. I feel this connection to others. I feel more connection to this planet. We know the research, we know that there's increased nature relatedness as a result of psychedelic experiences or non-ordinary states. It doesn't have to be a psychedelic. It could be a sweat lodge. It could be breath work. It could be meditation. It could be any peak experience, getting to the top of a tall mountain and seeing the wow. So we see that a lot in the program. And the nice thing is, we, again, as practitioners, as healthcare providers in service to our patients, can show up whole as well. and we can bring that spirituality. So we can hold wherever the participants are at. So if they really, and we have spiritual card people on the team. So if somebody really wants to, like, as Chris and Graham had previously said, if people are resonating with somebody who on our team is more aligned with a religion, they can are more aligned with spiritual care or traditional ways of knowing, and like our elders, you know, they have that opportunity, but all of it is welcome. All of it is welcome, like people. And definitely in the journeys, we see that very common, that comments that they feel much more connected, they feel much more spiritual, they're much more interested. And again, back to the 50,000-foot view, we're seeing record numbers of applications to divinity schools again, directly related to the resurgence of psychedelics.
Wow.
So, you know, it's congruent. It all goes together.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Graham, did you have anything you wanted to add to that, or?
Yeah, I could speak a little to that. If in full agreement with everything that Pam said there, and just also speaking to your question around like models and Stan Grof's work. And I quite like Stan Grof's work. I've read quite a bit of his, and he's got a very interesting model, and I believe it has a lot of value. But my personal opinion, my experience of the universe is that it is infinitely complex and infinitely mysterious. And so models have value, absolutely. But there's, in my opinion, there's no one model that captures it all or is the one right model. That we can use models and find value in them, but there's lots of different models, and all of them are just an overlay onto the infinite mystery. None of them are the actual truth. And that's really played out in my experience with my personal adventures with psychedelics, as well as working with Roots to Thrive, is that we could, if we wanted to, probably overlay a model onto some of this and find a way to, okay, this fits into the model this way and that way. But I don't think we need to, and we can sort of let the mystery unfold, and healing is happening. And that's what's most important here. And so we're not prescribing to a really complex and detailed model like, say, Stan Grof's. We have a looser model, speaking again to the inner healing intelligence, but letting the mystery play out for people on their individual level. And as far as I can tell, and as far as I'm concerned, it's working. And just like Pam said, we're seeing them move in a direction of more openness to possibility, often in spiritual directions, often in being more kind, compassionate, more connected to community, more connected to nature. And so it's those are the movements that I believe are the important ones. And so happy to see it.
I think that your admission about the limits of models and modeling is huge. And I think is a part of the inability to do that is what haunts us on so many levels. It's like we fall in love with our models, and we think that they are accurate reflections of what's real. And everything is just us putting it into the human language and human understanding, and that has no real relationship necessarily to what's actually going on. It's all how we perceive it and explain it to ourselves. And falling in love with that is a form of self-love. It's like we get blinded by it. But anyway, Chris, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, the word that comes up for me in hearing about the spirituality, well, first of all, I have to put the caveat that, like, really, as I've said, this is only about a year's worth of exploration of spirituality, and I have 40 years before that where that was just not even considered. So bear that in mind. The word that comes up for me is gnosis, this direct personal experience of, call it the divine, call it the spiritual world, or whatever. And I think when I had previously considered religions or spirituality, I was focused more on the exoteric aspects of it, what is literally written in the Bible, as opposed to what is behind that, what led to the writing of this, or this attempt to put into words what this is. And I've been led down this path of, I suppose, exploring, early Gnosticism, the early Christian church, esotericism, with literally these kind of hidden or personal ways of engaging with that. And my feeling is that if there is to be a healthy spirituality that doesn't lead to dogma or attempts to control people, it has to be coming through that personal connection by whatever means is accessible to you, whether it's journaling or meditation or psychedelics, or some folks have these spontaneous experiences that seem to come out of nowhere there. But until you grapple with it personally and you feel the truth of it personally, it's not going to make a lot of sense. And for me, like, there's aspects of things that I would read about, near-death experiences, apparitions, indigenous societies that would talk to spirit guides or whatever, made no sense to me. It just sounded absurd to me until I'd had this experience. And I have not engaged with any of those directly, but now it seems conceivable because there was just, it's like this sense or part of my brain that lit up and activated once I had that psychedelic experience. And it's really just an entirely different way of knowing. And the really exciting thing for it, the reason that I think the spirituality, or at least for me, undergirds all of this is, look, I mean, the world right now, it just feels like there's more and more dominoes being set up and ready to fall at any moment. I mean, if I compare where I was a year ago and where the world was a year ago, it's not any better. I could argue objectively that it's worse, but yet I am hopeful. And I was not hopeful this time last year. And that hope has to do with this different way of being. And it is somehow connected to that communal way of relating to people and this kind of spiritual thing. And I don't quite know how or why yet. It's part of what has developed into a rapacious appetite to explore these things, looking at the perennial philosophy, looking at world religions, looking at different models like idealism for how to move forward with this. But there is hope for me there. And this is partly why I want to promote the work that these folks are doing so much, because I just sense the healing that would bring to the world if this was more widely spread. Roots talks a lot about ripple effects that, yes, it's a 12-week program, but then you are changed and you go forward and you interact with people. So I'm working at the college I work at trying to set up a community of practice like this and think about different ways of delivering curriculum that has some of this kind of inner wisdom in that. And, I'm really heartened to hear of the increased enrollments in divinity schools and things like that, because one of the other things that I really got out of Jeff Kripal's work was his view of a third way forward that is neither purely religious nor purely technological, but is some kind of a hybrid where we are using science and honoring science, but it is not the be all and end all. And we take religion seriously, if not literally, and we find some way of braiding those worldviews together and move forward in a way that is really healing for not just us, but for our families and our species. So yeah. I don't know if I've answered that. It's a little bit of a ramble there. And
no, man, it's fantastic.
A ramble up in my head there. I'm still grokking this, but that's where I'm at.
Well, I mean, a little bit to what Graham was saying about, letting the mystery live. I think if people allow themselves to exist with a little bit of mystery, it opens up the doors. It's like suddenly things that were closed to you are way more accessible, and you live in, it's like that whole idea of a disenchanted universe. And if we admit that we don't know the magic that's at root in things, then all of a sudden much more becomes possible, even beyond what we've flirted around with in our various mythologies and whatnot. And I think that's a healthy sense of wonder that we've lost. And I think if we can start to get that back around healing and around a bunch of other things, I think that we'd be ultimately a lot better off. The other thing is that, you guys have been talking about the process of going through this, and one of the terms you used was compassionate witnessing. And I want to hear more about that, in that I think that we could all use more compassionate witnessing in our lives. And I think if we all developed that skill, we'd have a lot more a more civil society. Can you talk to me a little bit about what you mean by that and how it's deployed in service of the program? Graham, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. I can take a first stab at that. So it is actually a really core part of the program, and it is brought in early on. And first it is modeled, the facilitators model this process to participants. And then over the course of the first few weeks, participants are invited to share in that process as well. And It's hard to define exactly. It is more about the intention than the words that are actually spoken. And the intention, one of the ways that it gets summed up is sharing your, expressing to the person who just spoke, I see you, I hear you, you matter. And that can be conveyed in a number of different ways, but it's essentially hearing the person and without trying to fix them or cheer them up, just let them know you're allowed to be you exactly as you are, and I care for you in that way. And it's amazing what that can do for people. It just allows people to open up and be held in a way that they're often not held anywhere else in their lives. And that's a big part of what I think the medicine in this program revolves around, is this not only being witnessed in that way, but witnessing others in that way. It goes both ways. It's reciprocal and it's healing on both ends.
Pamela, do you have anything to add?
Well, and what I like about it is it ripples out, because people start using it in their marriages with their kids.
Sure.
Just that hearing, and even we've had a lot of physicians come through the program, and policymakers, and just so many things can be challenging. Somebody comes into your office and they're like, parking shit, traffic shit, the elevator, and you're like, that sucks. I can feel that. And people just like, oh, yeah. Yeah. And then they can move. They can move. Like they're heard, they're held. And again, I just so often hear from the participants how they're hearing their kids do it back to them, and they're hearing, and it's just it's compassionate, right? It allows you, you're just fine how you are, and I hear you. And
yeah. And it's a learned skill, which we're not learning until, people in your program are, but your demonstration of it and the value it's proving there, I think, is showing the rest of us that there's a lot more possible in how we live our lives and interact with one another that could be constructive, rather than the same old prescribed rules we've been following for the last 200 years or 300 years. And that's exciting, but it's also frustrating, because if we've constructed this reality, it's all on us. But we can deconstruct it by coming up with more positive ways of interacting with one another. But then how do you get that momentum going for a change in how humanity interacts with itself? That's a big question, and bigger than I am. Any thoughts, Chris?
Yeah, compassionate witnessing in some ways is easier to define by what it isn't than by what it is. When you haven't been compassionately witnessed. An example I give is, I have a friend whose mother passed from cancer, but she ended up living much longer than her initial prognosis had been. And he said, you cannot believe the number of people that came up at her funeral and said, well, at least you got 5 more years than you thought. And his response was, that doesn't make me feel any better at all. I just want you to be with me and say, this hurts, and let me sit with you, and it's okay to not be okay right now. That's all he wanted. But I think of that a lot, where we're not used to pain and heaviness in other people. It makes us uncomfortable, which is, I think, kind of the point of the compassionate witnessing, is to share. Like, in hearing you suffer, I feel this in my body. I felt small in my body, or I felt this knot of anger in hearing about how you were treated. A lot of compassionate witnessing is about what comes up for you and listening to that other person's share. It can be physical sensations, it can be imagery, but it's about the other person. The other thing that you'll see when people don't do the compassionate witnessing is people will make it about them. So somebody got into a car accident and they're dysregulated and they're stressed out, and you go, oh, that reminds me of when I got into the car accident. It was way worse than yours. And immediately you haven't heard the person. So we're so used to doing that and making it about us and our discomfort or our narrative. And it's about letting go of that and being in service to the person who is dealing with this in the moment there. And what it feels like is, it feels like being seen and being validated. And it's not about fixing your problems. You are the only one that can fix your problem for the most part. Others can't. But by having that compassionate witnessing happen for you, it calms you down, it regulates your nervous system, and it puts you into that space where you can actually start to map out those solutions to your own situation. And it's, yeah, it is core to the program, and it's something I really absolutely have picked up to bring out elsewhere in life.
Yeah, I mean, I'm married and have been for 30 years. And for the first 15 of those, if I had practiced that, we probably would have been a lot happier, but I was always trying to fix the problem. She had an issue and she'd tell me about it. And I'd be like, oh, well, do this, this, and this. And it's like, you're basically telling me how I failed to fix it. And so that's what I'm worried about, rather than just being able to tell you about my trouble and get some support, And it took me a long time to learn that. So it is a valuable lesson.
On that note, James, just for everyone out there that's in any kind of relationship, there's two saving questions on that. Do you want a compassionate ear, or do you want a solution?
Yeah.
That's it. You just ask that, and I just need you to hear me. I'm all yours.
Yeah,
I want a
exactly
solution.
right.
Helper hat on. Here we go. Right? And that'll save so many people so much in your relationships.
Yeah, a lot of confusion and other stuff as well. You mentioned that you have elders from First Nations who have helped to inform your program. Can you talk about some of the specific, what they bring to the table for you guys that helps to enrich your program?
Yeah, I'm happy to. Both of us can jump in this.
Sure,
For
yeah.
instance, last night, our elder Geraldine, she opened up the community of practice, our weekly session with our participants, with wise thoughts and words, and she's just such a settling energy. It's like sitting at the feet of a wise grandmother. You just really settle into it. And in our ceremonies, there's a number of things that we've brought in that are elder teachings from Sunamis teachings or Blackfeet teachings. For instance, we share in the room in the direction of the killer whale, so the direction the killer whale travels in Sunamis territory, which is right to left. So we share that way when we're in circle. Tears are sacred. So in the journey, if people cry or blow their nose, the tissues go into paper bags, and then they are ceremonially burnt at the end of the weekend. We have cedar boughs in the room for cleansing. We have what else? I'm thinking. Another thing. The inner healer is in. So during the journeys, the advice is in and down, to go in and down in, and that's why the eyes are covered. So it's a teaching. The eyes are covered so that you're not externalizing and going out. You're going in and down. Those are a number of them. Graham, there's many more I'm forgetting.
Yeah, the in and down was one that I was thinking of too. You covered a lot of them. But we also, we have there's poetry, there's songs, there's other teachings that we've been given permission to use from specific elders. I know Elder Duncan Grady comes to mind.
Mm-hmm.
Another one of our facilitators, Todd Haspect, who has Indigenous ancestry. He'll often lead us with a smudging ceremony to open us up, which can be a very, very powerful and grounding experience to go into ceremony. So it's interwoven throughout, and it just feels like a really grounded, not only grounded in how it makes you feel, but grounded in tradition. Like this is based on something that comes from time immemorial. And there's for me personally, it just feels like something that feels stable, that you can rely on, that there is wisdom here.
It seems like maybe that allows you to trust it some, Go ahead.
Another thing from one of Duncan's teachings is that, culture and tradition is not static, but there are perennial truths, right? There are perennial things that have withstood the test of time. And so that's the lovely part of the weaving of the program, is that we are given permission, and we are gifted these teachings, and we are given permission to weave them in. So we have these teachings woven into some ritual that we're creating as a team, but also then the checkboxes that also the Western medical model also needs, but we can weave them all together in a way that is, again, patient-centered. So, and so we're kind of, I feel like it's really sweet that we're creating a Roots to Thrive lineage.
Yeah.
With all of our team. And I just always have this vision of this spiral upward, that we're spiraling upward in this uplifting manner.
Excellent. Chris, did you have anything?
Yeah, I'll jump in a couple of pieces here. One is that it's as Graham and Pam have mentioned, it's subtly interwoven. So sometimes it's hard to pick out explicit pieces. And partly for me, I work at an institution that is really actively in the process of indigenizing itself. So sometimes I'm immersed in it. I'm not necessarily sure what came from Roots and what came from Camosun here. But what I would say that I've taken from this is, first of all, the recognition of this importance of honoring spirituality, of honoring family and community, and to making that a priority above other aspects of your life if need be, and reverence for that. There's a view of also wisdom coming from unconventional sources, from spiritual teachers, from dreams, from visions, which is very different than Western knowledge, because those can't be put through peer review, and in some cases can't even be shared. There's a tradition of gifting knowledge through ceremony, and it's not for everyone. It is because of the way the knowledge is transmitted there. One of the things that I see in the Roots program, which we've been bringing in at our college, is what's called the Circle of Courage by a fellow named Martin Brokenleg, which is where we try to instill the values of generosity, belonging, mastery, and independence. And I don't know if that's explicitly in Roots, but those are very much Indigenous values, and I feel that those are in the program, and it's what we're trying to kind of bring it into our educational institution. And I guess probably for me, the biggest single thing that hit me was in hearing a lot of people that were in the program that wound up with a lot of grief because they felt shoved into a box that didn't feel who they really were. And I've done some reading about depression, and one of the models that really resonates is this idea between having three different selves. There's the self as you see yourself. There is the self that you feel is your, aspirational self, your higher self. And then there is the self that you feel that you should be. And when those are out of alignment, you end up with this great anxiety and grief. And what was shared to me from Elder Geraldine was this notion that often in a kind of a colonial system, people are shoved into this box of who they should be, and you're not given a choice. Sometimes that even happens because of family trauma and dysfunctional family dynamics, where that is the role you are supposed to take. And the violence that does to someone, into their spirit, into their soul, and how it manifests in this emotional grief there. And I couldn't connect that, or didn't realize that was, something as an effect of colonialism, but it's something that I connected with very personally. And then it's helped me in just feeling in this small amount of damage that I've experienced to then reflect on what has been done to the First Peoples in our neighbor way, and in a much, 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 much bigger way. And so for me, it's helped as an educator to have had that knowledge, to then be able to sit with that and bring that into my teaching, and trying to keep that in mind in terms of how to meet learners and to undo that in that way, and kind of find a way to navigate the world forward in what they call two-eyed seeing, one eye with the kind of Western views and the other eye with the more Indigenous of being, and marrying those and braiding those together.
Yeah, it's like kind of keeping both visions in focus. That's the challenge that we have, the thing that we've inherited. We have the rational viewpoint, which is useful. I mean, obviously, we've done a lot with it, but it's not everything. And we need to learn to accommodate that, whether it's Indigenous or, spiritual in another sense. It's like other ways of knowing that can broaden who we are, what we are, and that sense of mystery, which I think helps us feel alive and invigorated. And all of that's like so basically, I think it's the antidote to the modern condition, but don't quote me on that. I hope it is, because if it is, then the cure is accessible, right? One of the things I wanted to talk about is that your program is in Canada, and my audience is largely in the United States. There's some in Europe, but it's if people are going to go out and find a program, what do you suggest they look for? I mean, I know that you guys have constructed a very well curated program. should people be looking for that? I mean, how would you say, what should they be on guard for if they're looking for a ketamine program and they can't make it up to north of the Canadian border?
We've trained a few groups that we have a professional training program in Roots to Thrive. When teams come forward that are already teams and they want to try to replicate something like what we're doing, of course, with their own parameters where they are. So we've had a few groups come through from New York and some from Florida, and many practitioners through California have come through. So there's groups out there that are really working on finding groups. I think it's really a buyer beware kind of process right now out there. And so with the different hat that I wear with the Psychedelic Association of Canada, we have on our website, we have ethics. And so under the drop-down ethics, we have check boxes to help people, like number one, how to find an ethical therapist. We also have a checklist there on how to be an ethical therapist that really covers a lot of these things. But we're also about to publish, probably within the next month or so, basically the qualities of a high integrity ketamine program, so that somebody can take it and go, these are all the elements that will give me good care. And then they can sit there and take that in their own, buyer beware method and say, like, do you stack up? Can you take good care of me? Do you do good medical intake? Do you have a good team that is skilled? What happens if I need extra help? What does that look like? And all of that. So they'll have this nice, beautiful checklist within a month on the website that will be complete. Just because there is just so much pop-up stuff out there. Exactly. And we do that. This is for your listeners. It's important, I think, that we cover this part. It's also around the dosing. Like, we use a psychedelic dosing. We use a transformative dosing. We use a dose that allows people to get into that psychedelic realm where there's the opportunity for transformation. There's also other models out there. Like there's the IV ketamine model that, personally, this is my opinion, I think it's a substandard model because there's not a lot of preparation. There's almost no therapy with most of them, not all, but with many of them, there's no therapy. And then you're out the door in an Uber in an hour. Right? Okay. Our participants are on site with us for 4 to 5 hours, depending how long they need to be. So, and they're kind of a model designed to have people keep coming back, because you never quite get well. You get a little bit better, but you're not well. So it's a good economic model. And I to those clinics, I ask them to aim higher. I think they should do a better job. They could do a better job. They could be really solid therapy. So it is a buyer beware. I think people should, really take a good look at what's included. Ideally, hopefully know somebody that's gone through the process there before and has some ideas on the improvement. And I think that is one of the huge strengths of Roots to Thrive, is that we take anonymous feedback all the way through our program from our participants, because we want to know what their experience is and how we can be better. And so it's not protocolized in that way, that we are always trying to do better. So for the folks in the US, like, go to the website eventually in the next month or so, download a copy, and then find something that really makes the mark. And there's a lot of accessible programs in the US. There's a lot for people that have a lot of scholarships, that have a certain number of hours from practitioners are at greatly reduced rates, because it's quite expensive in the US to go through. And it's really about making sure you're engaging with a team that has the skill and can take care of you.
What's the URL on that website?
The Psychedelic Association?
Yeah.
The Psychedelic Association Canada's website is psychedelicassociation.net.
Excellent. Cool. I'll put that in the description as well, so people can refer to it and go there if they want to check out that list. Sounds perfect for what people should be looking for. Graham, any thoughts?
Yeah, I don't know that I have that much to add to what Pam just shared, because I agree with everything she said. But ultimately, just be careful. Get as much support as you can, and trusted support as well. I think it's important to really formulate a relationship with, whether it's a team or even just a single therapist, to formulate a relationship. Take time. Don't rush into this. formulate that relationship, make sure that you feel safe and that you trust before going into a medicine session with anyone, because that's really important. Getting back to set and setting, being able to trust that you are in good hands is essential to having a healing experience. And so take your time with this. There's no need to rush into it, and make sure that, in addition, safety around the substances, make sure that you're using safe substances. And so that's going to be a very important part of the process as well. And so, yeah, be careful, take your time, make sure you build a strong relationship.
I see as the future of psychedelic therapy? I mean, where can this ultimately lead? I mean, one of the questions that we have written down on the outline was, how do we perpetuate this in the future? I'm interested in that, but then also, where could it go? I mean, like, I feel like we're building a knowledge base about this, and you guys are on the forefront of that, and we're getting better and better at deploying them. But I mean, are we just now scratching the surface, or is this all there is for it? I mean, what do you see as the potential? Pam, start with you, as you're the medical doctor.
Well, those who know me well know me. I'm a huge freedom of consciousness advocate.
Mhm.
I really hope that what we're seeing, and my background also, my first degree was criminology. So I was well aware of the war on drugs. And I think this is a
Yeah.
huge area in time that we're having to kind of pull ourselves out of. So
Sure.
I believe humans have the right to their own consciousness. These visionary substances and processes and rites of passage have been with us forever. And it's only in the last so many 100 years that not even 100 years, since the 70s, that they've been taken away from us. And I think we're going to look back quite astonished at this point of time. You know, our descendants will go, what the heck were you guys thinking that these were illegal? So I strongly advocate for freedom of consciousness. I think you have the right to access visionary medicines and visionary processes. I hope that what we're going to see is that these will be available on a whole spectrum. I think there's some people that would prefer a pill in a hospital, and I think they have the right to choose that. I think some people would prefer more like what we do at Roots to Thrive, where it's sort of medical, but mostly ceremonial, and want that. And then I think there's some people that will want to be able to have it on a, at a retreat center and not have to have a diagnosis or symptoms. Maybe they just want to be more artistic or more musical, or a better painter or better parent, or whatever that is. So that's what I hope. Well, that's what I vision for us all, is that we will, wherever on that spectrum. I don't think I don't think any of those exclude any of the others. We've had these forever. We know they can be safely used recreationally. We know they can be safely used ceremonially. We know they can be used therapeutically, and we know they can be used fully in a pharma model. So I don't get upset about any of those models. I don't want any. I think we need them all. And that's what I hope. I hope that we have safe pharmaceuticals, safe therapy, safe recreational, safe spiritual available. That's my hope. And I hope it happens like next year.
Graham, where do you see it going?
Well, I too am a big advocate for freedom of consciousness. And well, I'm not one for making predictions, and so I don't see anything as inevitable, but where I think the potential lies and where I hope this goes, and where I think it is possible. I think this could save us. This could save humanity, because the way that I see this process working is, again, talking about ripple effects. If this continues to grow, where what I'm seeing in people is and in myself is, we have to start with the healing. We need to heal ourselves. But once we've gotten to cross a threshold of healing, then we start being more activist. We start helping others. We start becoming engaged in our communities. We start spreading love and kindness. And that's what this world needs. And I see that's the potential here. And that's what we need. And thinking in terms of, again, connection with nature and the sustainability of our environment, thinking in those terms, this all starts to come online once we have this healing and then mind expanding experience. And so that's where I see this potentially is going, and where I wholeheartedly hope it does.
Amen to that. Chris, do you have any thoughts? And that's basically what I've got. So if I've missed anything, make sure you fix it for me. Did I miss any questions or what? Anything important?
Yeah, I'll answer your first piece, and then we can touch base here and have everyone in
Yeah.
the room have that. So, it occurred to me that one thing that we've talked a lot about the community model with Roots to Thrives, and there are some folks that are just really not comfortable being in groups. Sometimes their trauma or whatever it is just too great. So I should also add that Roots has its own individualized programs for folks that are just need that environment for safety. And also, and I don't know what it's like in the States, but I would imagine it's similar. You're seeing increasingly more and more counselors that are willing to sit with folks while they have these, they bring in their own medicine and they produce these safe spaces, or folks that are also helping do integration work post psychedelics there. So that's another, I think, area of growth there. And Roots itself, or Vancouver Island University, which it's affiliated with, actually has a training program to help folks get these skills in addition to Roots' own training programs there. So I see that kind of growth increasing. What I would love to see aspirationally, and maybe this, I should add this for international audiences here, is that, there's a view that in Canada we got free healthcare and everything's covered. It's not the case, that there's kind of there's a core set of healthcare that is covered. But one of the things that I find frustrating is that there's a lot of preventative medicine that is not covered unless you have an employee health plan. So, massage therapy or nutrition or even counseling is not by default covered under our national healthcare plan. I'd love to see this covered. And for two reasons. One is that I think that would ensure a certain level of standard of care that would guarantee coverage. But also, I see this as incredibly valuable preventative medicine. How many healthcare problems are coming from folks who have opiate addictions or alcoholism that stem from emotional challenges or binge eating disorders or things like that. And we don't really have a satisfactory way within our current healthcare system of addressing that, other than kind of at the end of the road there, where in some cases people's bodies are shutting down and they're being treated palliatively because they've been drinking for years, for example. What if you could intervene 30 years earlier with this kind of medicine and have an intervention that happens over 6 months? Not only is that far, far better as an outcome for an individual, but it also, just even from a cost perspective to the medical system, is far, far cheaper too. So it's a win-win. And as a side benefit, we get a completely more loving and caring society. So wins all around. So I hope we get there. I hope, and my major concern is that this psychedelic renaissance happens in a way where we have these success stories and not the negative stories. This is why it's so important to promote people that do this well, so that people see the real benefit of taking that care and not rushing it out the door. Because I like Graham says, it could change the world, and I'm really hopeful that we eventually get there. The one last piece I will say is that there's the psychedelic side of this, but there is also the just way of being side. Roots also does offer versions where there isn't the ketamine piece, just sitting in community and learning these skills of compassionate witnessing. And to be honest with you, that's what stuck with me longer. I don't have a hankering to go back and just do the visionary experiences, although I will probably do that from time to time. What's really left me with a craving for is more of these person to person, meeting people as human interactions, and not as who they are politically or what they do for a living or what their family background is. Honestly, just grappling and meeting with and discussing the human experience. So I think that's another whole avenue that comes as an offshoot of this that we can carry forward, all of us. And
I just want to jump in and add some numbers you said, Chris, because I think it's for those out there that may be listening that are policy folks or work in the insurance and are contemplating it. This is a huge cost savings. In our program, we were able to crunch some of the numbers just on if people came into our program only with depression, which is never the case. There's always like 2+ challenges: PTSD, depression, anxiety, substance use, disordered eating, grief, adjustment disorder, burnout, et cetera, et cetera. There's always like 2+ really. But if somebody came into our program and only had depression, we saved the BC healthcare system about $30,000. The program costs about $6,000. So the net of that is $24,000 per person that comes through our program at a minimum. That's the minimum.
In my community, I mentioned the fact that I had a substance abuse issue, and it's endemic in our community. And part of the reason why that's the case is because we have a lot of childhood trauma. Adverse childhood experiences. We have in Humboldt County, where I live, it's one of the highest rates in the state, and that's coupled with some of the highest addiction rates in the state. And so the conveyor belt has basically gone from, you're born in poverty, you go into a traumatic situation with parents who are often addicted to chemicals, and then you grow up without having those issues treated, and then you begin to re-traumatize your own kids, and it's a cycle, and it feeds itself. This sounds like a mechanism that could potentially break that cycle if people were able to find a way to break through all the noise and have an experience that transcends all of that. And here's hoping that that's what can occur. It's interesting with childhood experiences, and this is something for the clinicians in the future to think about, but like, at what point would such a intervention be healthy? Like, how would we format those things? Like, Graham, in your program, is 18 or 21 the age that you cut off, or is there a cutoff? How does that work for you guys?
Yeah, right now it would be adults that are eligible for the program, but there's conversations happening about the efficacy and the ethics and the value of having younger people involved in this type of treatment. And I think with the proper care, with the proper support, and certainly we'd want to do that carefully. But I could see how there could be value in helping people that are at a younger age have experiences that can be healing and valuable in this way. So I don't know exactly, but I wouldn't be surprised if things start moving in that direction.
What are your closing thoughts after all this, Chris? You brought this to me. I appreciate it. I feel like we've gotten a fantastic conversation, and obviously you've gotten a lot out of the program. But what are your final thoughts on this?
Yeah, I would just say it's been a transformative thing, and one of the things that I take from it is it's a different way of being. It's like I would kind of, it's like a door that's there and a little bit of light spilling out from this. And in the past in my life, I've kind of tried to peer around the corner of that door and see what's in there. And it's now fully open, and I don't think it's closing ever again. And so I don't want people to be trepidatious because of this experience, because it has been so transformative. But it is transformative, and it changes you as a person. And it's one of these things where it's like, to be part of something like this, you want to make sure that you are prepared for that you have your supports in your family, in your career, and your friends, and then really go all in, because it is the kind of thing that can really help you get out of those loops of constantly, trying to push the boulder up the hill and having it roll back down on you, and really make that jump into breaking those old habits and those old ways of thinking. So I cannot say enough good things about this, and I'm really grateful for you to be able to share this with what's going on with the world there. And the only thing I would add is just as an educator, I'm trying to think about ways to bring some of this energy into the classroom. Obviously not giving my students ketamine, although I'm sure that would make my class very popular, but just how to treat people differently. And so I will put that out there to anyone who's an educator. If you're interested in chatting, I'll give James a link to contact me, and would love to have some of those discussions, and pass that over to Graham as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Graham, what are your thoughts as we wrap this up for today?
Yeah, I'm just really grateful for this opportunity to get the word out, essentially, because I think that's a really important part of this as well. Not only just sort of raising awareness, but also destigmatizing as well, both mental health in general, but also the value of psychedelic assisted therapy and helping in that process. there's, we are moving through this psychedelic renaissance. Awareness is definitely raising, but there's still a lot of misinformation and lack of education around this in some circles. And so just, continuing to get this information out to let people know that this is a valid and validated approach that has a lot of really, really powerful results that are mounting. And so, and just with that, just along with everything that Chris shared, just how there's opportunities here, not only with psychedelics, but with the use of community, the use of compassion and showing up in new ways that I think is really important here. And so it all ties together, I think. Though, in my opinion, it's the combination of psychedelics and community that is the real medicine here that I hope spreads.
Well, being part of Roots to Thrive has made me a complete optimist. I have to admit, in medicine, I had a great practice, but when I was able to collide with Roots to Thrive and we were able to make this program, I would happily do this for the rest of my life for free. This is why I went into medicine, to be able to do this kind of work that really is innovative, leading edge, puts a patient right at front, and also allows the team that serves them to be really healthy. We're not perfect. We mess up. We make mistakes, but I feel the most optimistic about health and healthcare and wellness and prevention than I've ever felt. And I think Roots to Thrive is definitely a shining example of opportunity. And I really hope people will take what we've done and do it where they live and where they work and make it even better.
I appreciate your guys' time and your expertise and taking the time out of your day to talk to me and Chris. I really, really appreciate it.